It is a pleasure to be back. Welcome to the next series of Beyond Boundaries and Let Us Talk series. I am your friendly moderator, Sangeet Grover, and I'm the founding director of Future Knowledge, which is an organization dedicated to women empowerment, sustainable initiatives, and IT infrastructure development. Before I introduce our distinguished speakers, let me share with you an abstract from one of my recent passionate reads. The name of the book is Execution and is authored by two accomplished writers, Larry Bossidy and Ram Charan. This book talks about the financial and economic crisis that began in earnest in 2008, which seems quite relevant during the current times too. It talks about witnessing a permanent reshaping or resetting of the global business environment. It says the old normal is gone and won't be coming back. The old rules are shattered. Radical change is becoming routine, and the ability to execute is more important than ever. And I feel how true these words sound during the current times, too. What I found interesting was that the authors gave four key forecasts, which may be relevant during this time, too. Firstly, they said that growth will be slower, but the company that executes well with confidence, speed, and resources will be able to capture the emerging opportunities. Secondly, competition will be fiercer, and that is why the margins for error are thinner here. Thirdly, governments will take on new roles in their national economies. Companies that execute well will be more attractive to government entities as partners and suppliers. And lastly, risk management will become a top priority for every leader. And that is what we all are doing at this point. So, with the tone being set, we will now deep dive into the similar context and get a glimpse into what near economic future beholds. Would it reshape or would it recover? Let us know that from our distinguished panel of guest speakers today. But before that, a quick note on our housekeeping rule. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the comments box. I will bring them up after all the speakers have finished. With that note, let me introduce you to our first distinguished speaker, Mr. Prantik Majumdar. Prantik is a computer engineer and technopreneur who graduated from National University of Singapore. He has led a successful digital marketing firm for more than 11 years, trained and advised more than 500 enterprises in Asia Pacific on all things social and digital. Prantik is associated with INSEAD and Quest Ventures as a mentor to advise early stage startups on digital marketing and web startups in key Southeast Asian markets. He was recognized as one of the 50 most influential global marketing leaders at the World Marketing Congress 2015, nominated for Umbrella's Agency Leader of the Year in 2018. Prantik believes that post-current crisis, business will go through the reshaping process. So let's hear his views in detail over the reshaping of the economy in the near future. Let me now hand over the mic to you, Prantik. Thank you.
Thank you, Sangeet, for the kind introduction, and hello and welcome everyone. It's indeed a privilege to be here and also to speak alongside Jayesh Bhai, such a an expert and someone who has been there and done such great work in so many industries. So indeed a privilege. Of course, I think this itself, as Sangeeta was saying, I mean, the very fact that you guys are reshaping the way you all do your events and engagement series through these digital platforms, I think speaks a lot about the world that we're already living in. And I'll just share my perspective. I've been in Singapore for about 20 years and probably seen two, I wouldn't say similar, but two kinds of crisis. One was the SARS crisis of 2004, when I was just about graduating from NUS and entered a market, the job market just around then. And then around, of course, the great financial crisis. And that was just around the period when we were beginning to start Happy Marketer. So having been, having gone through a couple of these down cycles, I think my personal experience is, of course, it's any such downturns it's a devastating phenomena for various people. As we see in the US, probably we're about a 13-14% unemployment scenario, and could only get worse. Everyone's expecting the Q2 results to be worse than what Q1 results were. So I think we're all definitely preparing for a recession that could go on for anywhere between a year, 2 years. And of course, there's lots of debate going on about what the shape of the recovery is going to be. Is it going to be a V shape or W shape? Or someone had a, even more, I think someone else said it's going to be a reverse of what a square root looks like. I think everyone's speculating, right? We wouldn't know because every crisis is very, very different. But I think from whatever little I've learned from the past, downturns, I think I genuinely believe that each of these downturns kind of give us a chance to kind of reshape and pivot into a different theme. And again, what that would look like, I wouldn't go into speculating or guessing that, because honestly, I wouldn't know. I don't know. I wish I did, but I don't. But I think the principle of reshaping, I think that's what matters the most to me, because I think it's always there's an opportunity in any sort of crisis that we go through. And so the word shape, to me, I've kind of encapsulated that into it's an acronym. I think coming from Singapore, I think in Singapore anything and everything begins and ends with an acronym. So I've kind of lived up to that spirit. And so that S really starts for having a startup like mindset. And having run a startup of my own, and advising a few others, I think what that really means is having an agile mindset where you want to bootstrap, you want to have agility, you want to be able to pivot. And something that we are seeing in a lot of smaller companies as well as bigger companies, where they're trying to use the existing technology or the existing business practices, but trying to apply it to different use cases. So for example, in Singapore, if you look at, let's say, Grab, right, or which is an Uber equivalent, where it was all about ride hailing, but they had to quickly pivot into food delivery, right? Because that was the need of the hour. And likewise, you're seeing various businesses use their current assets and trying to kind of use a startup like lean methodology, agile working principles to kind of pivot, to kind of cater to what's relevant and new. And I think one of the things that, especially if you're a big company, I think what matters is to acknowledge that the world is and has and is changing. And I think, to me, the two simple examples is, I think there was a brilliant a graph that came about which showed the transition of, the contribution of online sales in the larger retail sales. I think in the US, what used to be about 16% of retail sales used to be online. Now, in the last 8-10 weeks, that's gone to about 30%. I think there was an article from L'Oreal which said that their online sales have now become 50% globally, which they had expected that to be the case in the next 10 years, has happened in the last 3 months. So I think the retail is a massive. It gives you a preview into what the world would look like. Likewise, payments. I believe what used to be non-cash payments globally used to be about $500 billion has now suddenly become $1 trillion in the last 3 to 4 months. Again, retail and payments are a good leading indicator of what the world might look like. So I think having that startup mindset, that agility and lean methodology, I think is step one. Next is the H for human, right? In the shape, the next part of the acronym is human. Is how do you make human-centric decisions? Now, this is a very a debatable topic, but a very important and interesting one. Because at one end, we are saying we got to be more productive, we got to use more technology. But I think we got to bear in mind is I think there are interesting examples of where companies are upscaling, reskilling people, ensuring that they don't really have to fire people, and keep that as a last resort. Because I think we got to have our heart in the right place. Whilst we drive for productivity and profits, I think the other P that's very important is people, and how do you make human-centered decisions? So I think that's something that we have really practiced in Happy Marketer and something Jayesh Bhai advised us right at the start is do your best to keep people on board. So I think in our company over the last 3 to 4 months, what we have really done is we've cut all extra fats and extra costs. We have taken massive cuts at the senior level, so that we had pledged right at the start that we don't have to fire people, because we know that when people are fired, especially during such times, it's a structural change. Many people may not get jobs for the next 1 to 2 years. I think I have lived through the as a child, I've lived through the Asian financial crisis when I grew up in Indonesia, and I've seen a lot of families go through very hard times when such structural firings happen. And not only does it impact the person, it impacts his or her family. Also, the people who are left behind in the company who still are employed, it impacts them as well because they kind of go through a very insecure period, and it also impacts the ecosystem at large. So I think being human centered, making humane decisions, I think are very critical, and that's only possible if you take a long term view. If you're playing a short term game, that's not possible. So to me, that's the second part of reshaping: is as companies, as entrepreneurs, as founders, or even as employees, can we take decisions with both our head and heart? Third, which is what I was talking about, is acceleration. So the examples that I gave you about retail and fintech, they are just the tip of the iceberg. I think what, if anything, that we have seen in the last 3 to 4 weeks, or 3 to 4 months rather, is how quickly digital is accelerating, across all industries. It's not just travel, it's not just retail, it's not just fintech, it's any or every industry that you can think of. And to me, that's a good sign. And if we take that positively, I think there's a lot to be gained, because I think it was going to happen. It's just that now it's accelerated. So whether you're talking about banks, telcos, insurance, airlines, I think this is the opportunity, especially for youngsters, especially for young startups. This is their moment. I've just recently, this morning, I was speaking to a company that was into event management, and they have basically completely pivoted themselves in the last 3 months into facilitating digital events. Literally, what we are doing right now is how do you kind of advise companies to use platforms like StreamYard that we are using, or other platforms like Hopin, to run digital conferences, to have breakthrough rooms. How do you manage contacts? How do you have digital CRMs? So I think, to me, that's the exciting challenge. And I think we have seen this in the last two rounds of crisis that I spoke about. During SARS, I think the whole Chinese e-commerce ecosystem literally began post SARS. The Alibaba, Tencents really flourished after that. 2007, 2008, after that crisis, literally the whole, the iPhone ecosystem completely went berserk after that crisis, because today the apps that we use, that we can't think a day going beyond, such as WhatsApp, such as any app store app, right? It all emerged after 2007, 2008. So I'm very excited to see how does our economy and industry look like post this crisis, which hopefully ends somewhere in the next 6 to 12 months, especially with work from home and other interesting models coming up. To me, this is an exciting acceleration. So in that shape, S was for startup mindset, H for humane decisions, A for acceleration, P and E. So P is again really about the broader purpose. And again, it's a overused word, but I think it's very critical. And I'm certain Jayesh Bhai would have a lot to say about this, given all that he does for social enterprises and purpose-driven organizations. And already we are seeing this, right? In the last 1 month after the George Floyd incident, we are seeing such at some companies are just kind of lip syncing to it, but some companies are actually making some fundamental shifts and changes. For example, there are brands that have been there for 50, 70, 100 years are now beginning to those brands came into being during the in an era where there was slavery was omnipresent. So, for example, brands like Darlie toothpaste, many of you may not know, used to be called Darky at one point in time. I mean, couldn't get more racist than that. Now, Darlie is going to change its name because you don't want to stand for racism at all. So there is an active movement. So I think something that I'm seeing in brands and companies is not just to reject or condone negative elements, but to actively, change their business policies to stand by good principles. And I think in our current era, fighting against racism, fighting against discrimination of any sort, whether that's sexual preferences, gender bias, or anti-racism, I think this is the era which I'm very, very sure and positive about. Is I think this is the crisis where, again, going back to the book you were talking about, Sangeet, I think it's also about, how do you make impactful businesses? How do you get into sustainability? I think we have seen large organizations like BlackRock. They have come in with mandates saying they will not invest in businesses that don't take into consideration about long-term impact and sustainability. This is also the chance to, think about what can we do as businesses so that we don't go into age-old practices that did not really cater to the environment. I really hope that's something that most businesses and entrepreneurs, build into their purpose. As there's a philosophy called B Corp, right? There's a B Corp organization where you just don't look at the bottom line, but you look at the triple bottom line. You look at profitability, but you look at people as well as you look at impact, right? So that's what, to me, purpose is all about. And the last is ecosystem. I think just this morning I was reading about, we all are familiar about the PayPal mafia. So PayPal, when they sold to eBay, how so many entrepreneurs came from that. You had Elon Musk, who came and made Tesla and SpaceX. You had Reid Hoffman, who made LinkedIn. You had the founders of YouTube come from that ecosystem. You had people who went on to invest through 500 startups and Sequoia. And then I was reading about the Microsoft Mavericks, where at least, Microsoft eventually created, I believe, about 10,000 millionaires, of which 13 went on to build billion-dollar companies, including, and mostly into automation, into enterprise software. So some familiar names would be UiPath. There's one particular gentleman who went on to build three household names such as Glassdoor, Zillow, and a few others. So to me, this whole ecosystem thinking is very critical. It's not about just building your company, but can you create an ecosystem around this? The Tatas are, of course, known to kind of practice that, right? It's not just about their company, but how do you build an ecosystem, not just of companies, but also how do you build a good ecosystem for people to live, good schools, good hospitals. My dad having worked in the Tatas, I've kind of lived through that. So to me, that whole ecosystem thinking, I think, is the last part of the shape model. So yeah, that's my principle, that I think, anytime an event of this sort happens, it is a chance to not just quickly recover, but also chance to pause and think about how can we reshape. What is it that needs our attention beyond just making profits and money. So I'll end with that. SHAPE, S for startup like mindset, H for humane decisions, A for acknowledging and making the most of digital acceleration, P for purpose driven organizations thinking about the triple bottom line and not just profitability, and E for thinking about the larger community and the ecosystem. So that's from my side. Sangeet, over to you. Would love to take any questions or hear Jayesh Bhai's perspective on this.
Prantik, honestly, that was fantastic. Really like the shape framework that you gave. Have resilience like the startups, be more, human centered. They should be accelerated, digital and tech. It should be purpose driven, and of course, the last point, have an ecosystem, better ecosystem for to deal with it. Uh, Wonderful. Really liked it. Okay, so our next esteemed speaker is none other than Mr. Jayesh Parekh. Jayesh is a co-founder of Sony Entertainment Television, a major television network of Sony Pictures Entertainment. He was a managing partner and now a senior advisor to Jungle Ventures, which is pan-Asian cross-border technology venture capital funds based in Singapore. Jayesh is on the advisory board of a non-profit called Akhand Jyoti Eye Hospital in Bihar. He is on the investment committees of three of Avishkar Capital Funds, which are social impact funds. He's also on the board of Sanctum Wealth Management, One Animation, and Mila. He spent over 12 years at IBM in Houston and Singapore and was part of the team that brought IBM back to India in 1993. He is an entrepreneur in residence at INSEAD, a board and charter member of TIE Singapore. He's also a member of Angel List and Indian Angel Network. Well, recently Jayesh has become a published author of his first book, What Shall We Do with All This Money? Inspiring Perspectives on Wealth. I have read the book and highly recommend that everyone read it too. Sir, the lights are on you now.
Thank you so much, Sangeet. I think I am kind of sort of embarrassed. I think just because I'm older, I've got more things on my resume for you to talk about compared to Prantik. So Prantik, we should work on that. So I brooded over this topic about reshape or recover. And I think the first biggest point that I want to make is to tell people that this is a pause. A pause button was hit early this year. And the only thing unknown is when will the pause button be released, both for life and economy? When will that resume? I think most of us know that it won't be on pause forever. So our lives, our relationships, our family life, workshop, work, travel, vacation, restaurants, clubs, healthcare, fitness, economy, kind of sort of all froze in various ways for each one of us in their different ways, depending on where we are. Life kind of went into a hold pattern. I can put an analogy like a plane circling, above, trying to wait for clearance, ATC clearance. I think similarly, some countries, while they are on hold, they're starting to give clearance to open the economy, and some are still unsure and cautious and opening in a phased manner. For example, like Singapore. So Singapore is now in phase two. I haven't seen so much joy. I think the last time I saw that joy was India winning a World Cup cricket. I think since then, this is like the second biggest euphoria, that the restaurants and clubs are again open. Before I go to the economy, there are a few things that I want to just touch upon. I think one of the most marked change that I saw was relationships. Uh, they've gone from warm, some lukewarm, some cold, all at the same time. So each one of us, is experiencing changes in our relationships. Our families came closer. We spent quality time, albeit forced, with each other in many cases. Many of the people whom we used to meet or whom we were in contact with regularly faded away. And yet, I have been on video calls with school friends, with college friends, and relatives and close groups, but there has been a shift in the relationship. So the social media traffic on WhatsApp has just increased dramatically for almost all of us. But then many of us have learned new hobbies, new board games, online games, longer and more frequent walks or bicycling, and these will continue. Yet, of course, at a slightly adjusted pace and duration now that the economy is opening up and people are going back to work. Again, going back to work is whether it's physically going back to work or working from home. So anyway, I think tennis, badminton, golf, swimming, I think we'll see continued and newfound enthusiasm in my mind. I think those are some of the things where it sort of will overhand, will stay. The other piece is healthcare. I think we will see a lot more focus on healthcare in the near term. And my personal opinion is that it might go back to normal. Hygiene will improve a lot, which is a good thing. Just like security checks at airport has become a norm now, good hygiene should and will become a norm. Ultimately, a vaccine will change everything. So it's a 2-year hit, sort of give or take, right? So, and then the other one piece, which is quite interesting, is giving back, right? So one good thing that happened is that many more people were compassionate, and there was a wave of empathy posts on social media. Many spoke up on behalf of migrant laborers. Many people organized fundraisers, and lots of people donated to them, some for the first time. This is good news. Of course, the question that I ask my friends is, will they continue once the pandemic passes? And will we all go back, or will we all go back to square one? I think that's really, the underprivileged were there before, and they will be there after. But I wonder if this empathy will change our lens and actions, and will it sustain in the future? I think online retail giving, like Prantik mentioned, online e-commerce, online giving, retail giving will sustain and grow in my mind. So platforms like Milap and Kiva, Give India, they will strengthen in its place in the nonprofit world. And also in parallel, social enterprise, which is doing good and making profit. So social enterprise and social impact investing, according to me, will get a lot more attention and will get much more funding as an asset class. So I'm quite bullish on that. The other point is about work. I think online work from home, audio video calls may increase, but my frank opinion is that most of the world will go back to normal. So will digital life improve and increase? For sure, I think it will. But e-commerce, which is thriving, will retain a lot of its gain. But will there be less travel for some time? Yes. But will this be changed permanently? I don't think so. I think it will, it won't take over completely, not for long. My call is that majority of working life will go back to normal. Business models will certainly evolve. But in my opinion, we will see a huge surge, and numbers on digital, online, mobile, fintech, e-commerce, esports, OTT, streaming platforms, and all of that. So some of the business models will evolve, but office and the work that we're doing, I know that the many companies have given time off for the rest of the year. Some have said don't come back till August, etc. Fair enough. The bigger the company, the more they can afford it. But I think the rest of it will all go back to normal. The other comment before I just come now to the final point of economy is geopolitics. I think I just want to just mention that because sparring between countries will continue post this pandemic. However, the business climate will go through a major shift as a result of the US-China spat. This may be a long-term issue than previously anticipated, in my opinion. And USA, in order to excel, always needed a number two player to compete with. It was the Germans, then it became the Japanese, and then Soviet Union, and then split after that, Russia, and now it's China's turn. However, the good news for us sitting in Singapore that it should be advantageous. Actually, both for Singapore and India, in my personal opinion. Singapore plays a pivotal role in the US-China commerce. And while there are some tensions brewing on the borders in Ladakh, and my feeling is that sense will prevail, and both India and China will have no choice but to play ball. And more so if President Trump gets reelected, which seems unlikely at this time. However, I would not bet on it. So just don't count on it yet. So again, the big elephant in the room, which is economy. I think the majority of our economic life will go back to normal. Again, I feel that there will be some collateral damage, no issue, and the damage may shift from one group of people to another group of people. For example, if some of the migrant laborers don't want to return to work, they may get hurt, and some unemployed laborers may get trained or retrained and enter the workforce. So has the economy taken a major drastic hit before? Has this happened before? Sure. I mean, think about, so because I'm older than Prantik, I can think of the major drastic things like complete shift from gold standard happened in 1971. Oil embargo happened in 1973 when oil went from $3 to $12 per barrel. I mean, the Americans thought that the world was coming to an end. And then the 9/11 happened, the Ebola happened, SARS, Prantik mentioned, happened, that outbreak. The HIV epidemic happened. Then, of course, the 2008, 2009 financial subprime crisis, most of us will remember, and now this COVID-19. And just like all of the rest of them, this will pass too. I mean, right now it feels like, oh, wow, the rest of them just look pale compared to this. But, I personally, I think, just look at the stock market. You don't have to look any further. So many people are waiting on the sidelines for it to correct. But it's not showing any signs of correcting. I mean, it goes through a little bit of blips here and there. So my personal opinion, the economy will bounce back. The question is, how long will it take? Will it take 6 months, 12 months, 18 months? No one really knows. However, as individuals, how does it affect us? I think that's something we need to just chat about for a few minutes. For Singapore, my sense is that it will affect us less than emerging economies. That's because we have the per capita resources to fend off such a pause in the economy. Until Friday, most individuals have not been spending on restaurants, travels, clubs, vacations, or shopping. So in post-lockdown, will it result in splurging or caution, right? So, I mean, psychologists can answer that if people will splurge or save, but you can wait for data over the next few weeks and months. As of Friday, right, morning, for example, I went to the badminton courts at a club and it was 75% full. The breakfast area and the badminton courts were 75% full. I went to a lunch in another club and it was about 25% full on day one. So I'm not sure, if you've seen these videos of people with masks queuing up outside IKEA or Daiso. I mean, that was a massive queue outside these stores. Holland Village was apparently a zoo last night, so they're trying to figure out what to do and how to handle this. So if you pin me down, my bet is that slowly but surely, consumer spending will return in a few weeks or months, and we will see an upward trend in spending over the next few months and quarters. Okay, it may not go to 100% all in all sectors all at once. I mean, you can debate, will it go up by 25%, then 50, then 75, and then 100% over the next few quarters? Or, some sectors like hotels and airlines, possibly that will happen. And then some sectors will see 33% to 66% to 100%, like durable goods or F&B, right? And but I just want to make a brief comment also on the entrepreneurial ecosystem. I think the VC investors have gone soft and cautious. I always wonder about that, because during that time, the time of crisis, there are big companies, like Amazon and Yahoo and eBay started, and they're doing extremely well. So I'm just surprised why they don't take a privilege, of the lower valuations. However, strong and savvy entrepreneurs are still getting funded. So digital, online, e-commerce marketplace, things like mobile payments, fintech, esports, these will get favors after this pause, according to me. So the valuation, I think, will also get reset, which really is the need of the hour. See, I mean, valuation always goes through this huge uptake because everything is bullish, nobody can do anything wrong, and then something like this happens. And so again, so net, I'm bullish on the entrepreneurial ecosystem, the angel investments, also VC investments. So in summary, again, not all is lost. The gloom and doom will subside. Majority of the world will go back to normal in the next 12 to 18 months, maybe 2 years. So in a lifetime, that's not a lot of time. But again, I can understand that people who are getting hit, they're saying, hey, it's easy for you to say that. Agreed. But I hope many things, I really do hope that many things do get reshaped, like income distribution, some unfair advantage, winner take all funding to selective growth companies, startups, killing smaller competitors, for example. Prantik talked about racism, for example, deep polarity in the society, environment, geopolitics, and the current form of capitalism. I really hope that, and I hope that it is not just merely a rhetoric because of the fear. I mean, many a times we've heard this and people all do rah-rah, and there's a lot of rhetoric, but, nothing happens. And I really hope that leaders of the countries, the financial institutions, the corporations, the societies, religions, NGOs, impact funds, environmentalists, they all come together to raise the collective consciousness of the world for a better world tomorrow. So again, thank you for giving me this opportunity, Sangeet, and happy to take questions from you and the audience.
Wow. Thank you, Jayesh, for covering such broad range of subjects in such a short span, like lifestyle, healthcare you've covered, economy, jobs and geopolitics. I really appreciate your data-driven analysis on the economy and geopolitics, and touching on both current and possible future affairs from risk and opportunity perspective. So your perspective makes us confident that things are not all that bad. Anyway, and now, my lovely, beautiful audience, it is time for our Q&A session. We have, how many minutes left? 27 minutes left. So we'll be able to take up quite a good number of questions. Okay, so let me check on the. Okay, we have Dr. Naresh from Sydney. So Jayesh, this question is for you. Which countries do you think can step up to balance the supply chain for the global market?
Yeah, so I think that's a very loaded question. I think it's not going to happen overnight. I think we're all having, again, I call it rhetoric, where everybody's basically saying, oh, we need to fix this. So the Americans are saying it, the Indians are saying it, but it's just too huge. It's massive. So while there will be a shift, I think in some sectors, India is definitely a winner. But beyond that, I think there may be some other countries in Europe, like Germany, people like Japan, who could. Again, it all depends on if they can be competitive. So that's the thing. The scale and the competitiveness, right, is just amazing in China, which is the elephant we are talking about in the room. So my bet is that even countries like Australia, while they are struggling right now, my hope is that sense will prevail and things will neutralize, and many of the things will go back to normal. However, there are countries like India, for example, that clearly have many things to do to gain that advantage. But the supply chain, it's very difficult to rock it completely, and just knee-jerk reaction probably won't happen, according to me.
Thank you, Jayesh. We have a question from Sangeeta Bhatia. What kind of job market or careers are expected post-pandemic?
Prantik?
Oh, okay. Who would like to answer that? Sorry.
Well, I mean, again, I think like what Jayesh Bhai was saying, I think a lot of the industries will come back, a lot of the jobs will come back. But I think to me, it's really about what skill sets can one have or one build in one's own repertoire to kind of be future ready. And I think one thing that I would say, and maybe it would come as bias because I come from the digital field, is no matter what field you are in, whether it's in healthcare, my wife's a doctor, I see that in her industry, whether it's in manufacturing, I think where there is a need for productivity and profitability and just better efficient ways of doing things, I think any sort of digitization or digital skill sets would come in, I think, handy. I mean, I would definitely put my money there. And again, I just want to call out that does not necessarily mean coding. That's because I think there's suddenly a huge hue and cry about every child needs to code. In fact, if I was to put my money, I would say we don't need to learn coding. The way machines, how smart they are, coding would happen on its own with machine learning and AI. I think there's just a, I mean, if you want to code, if that's an area of interest and passion, by all means, absolutely go down that path. But I don't think I think a lot of people tend to misunderstand this. That, oh, I mean, my kid needs to go for these Saturday coding classes and become experts in coding. But yes, I think digital skill sets in terms of how, I think it's a thinking. How will digital impact my organization, the people, my organization structure, my processes? How can my processes become more efficient? How do I cut out red tape? And of course, what kind of technology do I need to kind of orchestrate this whole thing? So I think there's a whole principle of what's called PPT, people process technology. I think thinking about that in your organization, uh, more than just the technology alone. I think to me that's a big change. But at the same time, I'm a big believer that apart from this whole people process technology in the realm of digital transformation, what will actually make a huge difference in the future, in my opinion, is the softer side of things. It's the emotional quotient. It's the creativity, because with technology kind of making the world a flat place. I think making democratizing information asymmetrical. I think it's the side of the brain which fuels creativity, your emotional quotient. How do you respond to situation? Your resilience, your EQ, essentially. To me, honestly, what our education system and school systems don't do very well at all is they don't necessarily shape that side of the human being. We are so much focused on STEM. Every school talks about STEM, but very few schools talk about building the future of emotional intelligence. The softer elements. So to me, if from a future, I wouldn't predict what jobs, what industry, but I would, there is a school of thought which talks about the T-shaped individual, which is basically have a good, broad perspective on life, on your industry, but choose one or two areas of depth. And I think encapsulate all of that with the softer side of things. I really think that element of art, culture, EQ, to me, if that is strengthened, I think one can be resilient no matter what industry you go in.
Thank you, Prantik. We have Candy Dell from Pune, and this question, she says, this is for you, Jayesh. She's saying, Jayesh ji, what corrections in economy will help the middle class, which forms most of India?
Yeah, so I think the percentage of people who own the majority of the wealth, right, is dramatically skewed. Now, is the middle class surging? Yes. I mean, if you go back and look at the last 20 years and 10 years, I think middle class is coming in its age. And I think so, therefore, you need more startups, the entrepreneurial system. So yeah, there are two parts to it. One is the corporate jobs and one is entrepreneurial jobs. And there are many things that many companies that are thriving on micro entrepreneurship, by the way. So there is a big wave of not just normal entrepreneurship, but also micro entrepreneurship. So I think India cannot get that many jobs kicking. I mean, no matter what. I mean, the number of engineers that are coming out, the number of candidates that are coming out, fresh graduates, is just too high for even national skills development and people like that. They're trying extremely hard, but it's very difficult. And I think entrepreneurship really is the answer. And so whether it's a normal mainstream tech or it's also social enterprise, I think more and more youngsters are looking for purpose. So I think that shift, I think, is important. The other piece is where the millennials who are going to come into wealth, I have a lot of hope for them. So, that's part of the things that I've also discussed in my book, which is to say that, hey, these people who are going to inherit hundreds of millions of dollars are not going to be the same as their parents, where there is single-minded accumulation of fund and succession and passing it to the next generation. They are looking for purpose. And so to me, I see that whole social enterprise will get favors from these millennials who will be looking for purpose. And so there'll be a lot of shift. So I think middle class people, again, one of the things that we talked about in the previous question that Prantik answered is that we just need to be smarter, right? So our education system needs to be smarter to say that, hey, are we going to cater to the same rote education as before, or are we going to have people who are problem solving people? And because if that is there, then the middle class have more opportunities. And so I also sort of pick at things like AI and IoT. UI UX is huge. Design, right? You start thinking of design and fintech, health tech, med tech, biotech. All of these are really something that if the middle class go after, even in terms of jobs, it's great, but also from the point of view of starting your own enterprise. And I think we are an entrepreneurial DNA in us. And so I say, and there are many more investors coming to the fore. So more and more angel investors are coming, more venture capital investors are coming. And so my feeling is that India is in a good place and the middle class is in a good place.
Thank you. Uh, we have a question from Roy Soma. Prantik, maybe you could answer this. Do you feel alternative healthcare industry has a promising future post-pandemic?
Well, I got to ask my wife. I'm not an expert in alternative healthcare. To me, I think healthcare as an industry, I think, as what Jayesh Bhai was saying, I think the common spine in all of these traditional industries that need to kind of change is the spine of technology. Is how do you, and again, with the purpose of how do you make it accessible? I think I would definitely back the trend of telemedicine. Now, whether the doctor on the other side is advising normal medicine or alternate medicine, that I guess depends on the utility and depends on what kind of problems we are solving. So I would say again, if my alternative one's looking at uh, Ayurveda, etc. I would again, right? I'm not an expert on the field, but I think the way healthcare will be delivered, will be accessed. To me, that's of concern. Is how do I ensure that access to healthcare medicine can be as far and wide as possible using, the technology has existed. It's about the political will, it's about the regulation, and it's about the entrepreneurial spirit that Jayasha was talking about. Is how can people, what the practice of the world have done, what Homage is doing in Singapore is let's use technology to democratize access. To me, this, I think there's a particular point that Jayesh Bhai made during his speech was about, it's about this, the fear of access has to be democratized. My biggest fear in all of this is where wealth is with the top 1%. And to be more than wealth, and I think this is where I have a lot of hope and I have a lot of learnings from Singapore's meritocratic system, where the great Lee Kuan Yew said that we're not all born equal. We all have different IQs and intelligence levels, but the role of the government or the ecosystem has to be providing equal opportunity. And I think that's something that countries like India need to kind of take into consideration. And whether the government, in India, they generally say that people succeed despite the government. So I hope the government plays its part. But despite that, I think it's the entrepreneur and the VC ecosystem. They need to look at and back technology companies or companies in general that are doing something to accelerate the access of various, whether it's healthcare, whether it's finance, whether it's retail. So coming back to alternate healthcare, I definitely think there can be a great future for this. But hopefully, the goal is to kind of democratize access and make it available so that people can then take a call, whether it's working for me or not, whether it's cost effective, so on and so forth.
Sangeet, I'd just like to add to that I think that this last 6 months, what we've gone through, I think the awareness, the access, the consciousness of people on this alternative healing or alternative healthcare has dramatically improved. I mean, you look at WhatsApp messages that will say simple things like, drink hot water with lemon, for example. Somebody says, eat this homeopathic medicine with arsenic and something like that. And I mean, everybody's trying everything. And I think personally, I think that this is thousands of years of awareness and thousands of years of knowledge, thousands of years of experience, really, of grandma's nuska, right, that we have used in many cases. And this last 6 months, I think people have become more aware because, again, it takes years for things like vaccines to happen, whereas this is like saying, oh, this, let's try this healing. And there are more people doing yoga, more people doing meditation, more people, doing all of that also. So alternative healing, I think that definitely, at least in India, I don't know about the world, but at least in India, it should have a good go.
My only fear, though, the only caveat that I would say is that in all of this, what I generally sometimes fear is the element of being able to validate certain things and the prevalence of fake news in the WhatsApp university.
And that's the mystique of India. Like, don't take it away. The mystique of India, you can't say, okay, prove it. There's nothing to prove. India is a proven country.
Great. Thank you. That was wonderful. So we have a question from Rajesh Nair. The question is for you, Jayesh. There is a school of thought globally that with 5G, AI, and VR coming in strong, physical travel and tourism will get substantially replaced with virtual travel, given its convenience, safety, and price benefits. Your thoughts, please. I hope it doesn't happen.
I think that it is really currently it is a fear in us, right? So when SARS happened and Ebola happened, HIV epidemic happened, we've been through this before. When the terrorism part happened, we all thought, oh my God, the world is permanently going to change. And then shifts happened, right? The security system changed at airports, etc. I think that yes, okay, it may shift a little bit in this next 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, but long term, the interpersonal relationship, interpersonal communication skills, however much I love this, if I had this audience in front of me of even 20 people, we don't need to have 200 people. It's just a different drama, right? You look somebody in the eye, they have the chance to rebut, and I can see the fire in Rajesh's eyes when he's asking me this question because he's expecting a certain answer, and if I don't give it, he has a rebuttal. Right now, he has no chance of doing that. Also, business, right? There is a lot of business that people say that gets done on golf course, for example, right? I mean, these are some old boys network things that happen, and all now women are also playing golf. So, these things are not going to go away, and there is such an amazing awe in travel, not just for business but also for personal pleasure, which sometimes now get mixed. So my personal sense is, Rajesh, I don't know what answer you're looking for, but I'm here to tell you that I think a lot of it goes back to normal. Will new business models develop? Yes. Will it shift some of this travel? Potentially, yes. But my bet is that long term, it'll all go back to normal.
I'll die if there's no travel. Anyway, so we have a question. Thank you so much, Jayesh. We have a question from Rami Singh from Chandigarh. His question is okay, we'll have to figure out who's going to answer that. Considering the current geopolitical crisis India is facing, the focus will be more on defense spending rather than in health sector. This could prove a huge deterrent in India's rise with not much resources available. What could be the way out for India? Who would like to take this?
Jayesh, by your perspective, is
okay. I'll just throw mine first to say that listen, this has also happened before. So yes, okay. Is there a panic? Yes. It's just right now people are all bent out of shape, and rightly so, right? I mean, I said, you said, he did, I did. I mean, I don't know why they didn't have drones. I mean, first thing I would say is, hey, get a drone up there and then go out and have chats with at the border, so you can clearly see. The whole world can see. Just stream it live, so nobody can say, well, I did it first or you did it first, and who pushed me first and all that, right? I mean, in the classrooms now, they have cameras, so nobody can run away from it. Again, coming back to defense spending, I'd say that we're already overspending in a country like India. I don't think you need any more. I think we are fairly good in terms of our defense. Okay, so, do you need to replace the tanks and replace the planes every so often and all that? That will happen regularly, not just because of what's happening now. A little skirmish like that, frankly, can be resolved by having, high level dialogues. And frankly, neither country can afford it. And both in terms of getting more aggressive, to be honest. And China's got a bigger problem. Thank God for President Trump. So at least till November 4th, we're in good shape. Post November 4th, like I said, don't bet against him.
Okay.
My perspective on that is, I mean, absolutely. I think genuinely hope India doesn't spend more on defense. I think the ratio of defense spend to GDP is just way too high. And in fact, there's a very interesting study from the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. I think there was a CNN article yesterday which spoke about, there's a general perception that, the Chinese army is way more powerful than India's. But if you actually read that study from Harvard Kennedy School by the Americans, it actually says otherwise. In fact, especially in the Air Force and as the strategic.
I don't think we need to convince anybody. I don't think they should go there. Let's. I mean, I'm not saying let's believe in non-violence, but on the other side, I don't think we need to beat our chest to say that we are more powerful and they are less powerful.
No, my only perspective was I think we shouldn't spend, but I would say that one sentiment that I generally don't like currently amongst, I mean, I'm only speaking from the Indian perspective, is this whole anti-China in terms of business. Like, this, I'm sure you guys would have seen this, people throwing televisions and this funny meme where Arnab Goswami is on TV and saying, don't buy China, but there's a sponsored by Oppo or Vivo logo somewhere. Because, if you have to do that, you have to give up at least 30 of India's top fintech and e-commerce apps. So Paytm to the Zomatos of the world are all Chinese funded. So I have an issue with that. I think there's a place for diplomacy to solve this, and let that play out rather than us suddenly go.
No, but Sangeet is going to yell and scream now at you. India wants to know, so please don't stop there.
Sorry, say that again.
I said Sangeet is going to scream saying, India wants to know, Prantik. Come on, tell us.
True. Okay. So that is a great perspective. Okay. Navneet from Chandigarh wants to know what, according to you, both has been your realization or learning from this pandemic experience?
Prantik, you go first.
Yeah, I think my biggest learning has been I have too much respect for preschool teachers. I have a 3.5-year-old at home. I honestly did not spend way too much time. I mean, I didn't get to spend too much time with him thanks to work travel. But with 3 months locked in and my wife obviously the hospital, I realized, man, hats off. So the first thing I did when the preschools opened, like Jayesh Bhai said, I was way happier than my son. And I actually went and told the teacher that, you manage 20 kids, hats off. So I just realized, I mean, that's my personal realization. But also, I realized the element of productivity from a work perspective. I love traveling for work overseas, but I think I'm not a big fan of traveling from meeting to meeting in taxis, etc. I just realize every day I probably, and I'm sure this is even more true in India, you probably end up spending 2 to 3 hours traveling to work. I just realized that work from home can be fairly effective to get work done, but I would like to keep my off time for the coffee chats and the club meetings that Jayesh Bhai was talking about. But so yeah, productivity from a work perspective as a realization, and yeah, hats off to teachers.
Yeah, so I did a few courses that were extremely helpful. So one that I would recommend to you is a Coursera course taught by Professor Laurie Santos called The Science of Well-Being. It's a free course right now. So before they change it, once the lockdown finishes, they'll charge again. So you should go and look at it. I think that was very powerful for me. So I do meditation, but it really re-emphasized the time I was spending on it and the frequency of what I was doing. So that's really one terrific thing that happened to me. I discovered another one which is called heartmath.com. So that was another one. And then there were a couple of TED Talks which basically talk about, say, I went looking for God and here is what I found. That was also extremely powerful by a lady called Anjali Kumar. So again, all of these are times where you retrospect and you basically try to figure out life. And fortunately, I don't have an operating life, which means I don't have office, I don't have staff, I don't have anywhere to go. So when the lockdown finished, I went from my bedroom to my study. So that was the distance I walked. But more seriously, I think once I structured my life, meaning I figured out saying, hey, listen, there are terrible things happening to people, and how can I overcome that fear? And that learning was that, hey, once you structure your life and you do basic things like you get a will and you have some professionals doing wealth management and things like that. And it doesn't have to be the quantum of it. It's just that you have, if something were to happen to you, are your loved ones taken care of? Or they're going to go into a complete frenzy? Once I got over that, I got my life back. So I went into that lot of online talking, a lot of online video conferencing with my high school friends, my college friends and all of that. And then the last thing that I did is that I got a teacher in Bombay online Zoom, and I started learning how to sing some old Bollywood songs. So Sangeet, if you ever have a karaoke session in your house, all I need is red wine and I'll bring my own system and we can have a sing song.
Absolutely. I'm trying to learn Carnatic music. So we can make a good combination. Okay. So we have a question now from Roy Soma. And then this is for Jayesh. Do you feel that online school system is an effective way of education? As going to school is not just academics, it has many other facets. What do you feel?
I think that it is definitely a combination. Just online can't work, right? I mean, first of all, Prantik will, obviously kill me if I said that, no, let's all go online. Then he'll say, wait a minute, I just finished telling you that I can't handle it. But seriously, there is something about the social quotient, right? So the SQ also, the EQ that Prantik talked about, you got to add SQ to it. And that SQ is social quotient. And I think for kids, especially, that is extremely, extremely important. And even there is a lot of talk about college education going out of favor. because the cost is very high. I agree with that. But the value system that develops, the camaraderie you get, the experience you get, right, the bonding you get, even in a place like INSEAD, Prantik, you know how it is. And so my sense is that, yes, is there a place for online? Sure. You can do some homework online and you can watch some videos online on weekends and stuff like that. But just going to school, I think, no, I mean, personally, I wouldn't like to change that.
We have a question from Professor Susanna from Hungary for Mr. Parekh. What is your opinion about the economic recovery from the influx of economic stimulus that the government is pouring in the economy to keep it afloat? Would we recover from that? If yes, then how and for how long?
Yeah. So I'd say that the governments of countries that can afford it have no choice. What's the point of accumulating wealth if you can't utilize it for the right people at the right place in the right time? And right now, while countries like America are printing money, as they say it, and I don't know, how that works, but at the end of the day, there is a pause, we said, right? So the economy came crashing down. There were some revenues that went down to zero, salaries went down to zero, and people have to live. So I think it's perfectly fine. Stimuluses of different types are necessary and essential. And that's, again, remember that the people who are making money are paying taxes, and those taxes are the ones that they're distributing again to, and the trickle down actually is going much further. So it's not like the rich are the only ones who are getting all that money. I think there are other people who are also getting money who are then going to consume. So I'd say, and then are we going to recover from it? And I'd say, yes, we've done that before. I mean, look at the financial crisis that Patrick talked about, right? I mean, that subprime also had a lot of monies that went in, and nobody now goes back and does analysis. At least I don't know. I'm not sort of an economist. I'm not doing all the dollars and cents about how much was put in and how long did it take to recover. So is there a possibility of inflation? There should be, but look at it. The Fed is actually cutting, so it's actually going lower and lower. So from my point of view, I really don't see any other choice. I think there is no choice. You have to sort of pump in money out into the industry and to the market and the people, individuals, and therefore the stimulus is the need of the hour. No choice.
Thank you. Candy says, wow, that's fab, JSG. Let's do a karaoke for Pancham Das' birthday on 27th. We want to hear you. We're going to do
But
that.
only 5 people are allowed, so we'll have to put it on Zoom otherwise,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. So we have, okay, this is the last question now. This is from Rajesh Nair. Has the future of enterprise in India moved into tier 3 and tier 4 cities with the massive migration out of the metros into such places? Or everything in metros will get back to normal with these people flooding back at the earliest?
Prantik, go for it.
Yeah, so I think it depends on what category of people we're talking about. So if you're talking about the migrant laborers, of course they've gone through a hell of a time, of course, and I would reckon that as soon as things kind of start fading away, people would move back because obviously people ultimately the human spirit is you would want to move towards the epicenters of power and wealth, right, for opportunity. So I think I would definitely see the labor force kind of flocking back to the Delhi, Bombays, and the tier 1 cities. But I think at the other end, what I'm seeing is I don't know about tier 3, tier 4, but at least the tier 2, tier 3 cities, the spirit of enterprise is definitely great. I think today you're seeing a lot of enterprises coming from Jaipur, Pune, Indore, Nagpur. It's not just the Bangalores and the Bangalores and the Delhi and the Bombays of the world. Even in Kolkata, even of course Hyderabad has always done fairly well. So I think to me, again, my hope is that from an entrepreneurship startup perspective, I think that spirit is percolating. The funding is also going down to that level, whether from HNIs or even institutional funding. Also, the larger companies are beginning to open their centers in some of these cities. So, to me, my hope is that the enterprises start moving down there. But I think the labor forces, I think, for the foreseeable future, will definitely flock back.
And so the only other thing I'd say is that government is starting to spend a lot more money on building airports in these 2 or 3 cities, more trains, more roads. And so the corporates then therefore will also go there. The corporates are also tired of paying these high costs and having these problems. So all the businesses obviously can't shift to tier 2, tier 3 cities, but many can and will shift because now there is access. The infrastructure is going to help that happen.
Thank you so much. That was really wonderful. And it was a very reflective session. And thank you all for such overwhelming participation. You can follow us on our Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube channels. and please keep the questions flowing. Also, share your preference for the next session and the topics you would like to be discussed and represented in our next webinar. Until then, God bless. Rab Rakha.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Sangeet.
you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Jayesh.
Sangeet.